Zach, one of the things that people are most concerned about in the area of psychology, obviously, is how to get people to change their behavior. And it's assumed that people are resistant to the idea of changing. You come into dealing with people where they might need to change their behavior, and you just don't assume that they're going to be reluctant to change. Can you tell me where you're coming from, why you see things that way, and how you approach talking with people about improvements like that?
I don't think people. I think that people will be reluctant to change in a framework. Well, there's this concept of buy-in. It's like there's the right thing to do, and then how do I get the person to buy in? Alternatively, I think about there's a right thing to do per my perspective, and part of the right thing to do is involve another human being if I'm helping them in the process of whatever it is they want to change. So because I'm involving them in the process, I don't think they'll be as resistant to it, or at least they'll be open to noticing what is or isn't working about them changing.
Can you give us some clues about how you get them to buy into the process?
Well, I make a distinction between buy-in and just being involved. It's the most simple way I can explain it is that I ask them what's going on. I mean, I know that sounds like a cop out answer, but there is. It's like people are in a lab trying to figure out what's going on with a student at school, or people are in supervision trying to figure out what's going on with a client, and people don't ask them very often. And I think that that's the person who has problems and their perspective about what the problems are crucial. And so getting them to figure out how to prioritize which problems or how to do the things they like to do is a crucial part of the process.
Could you give a sample question that you might ask somebody that gets to that approach?
Are we talking schools or are we talking in the life process program?
Well, let's try one of each. What would you say in the school situation, and what would you say in the life process program?
So a ton of times in schools, there's all right. Let's take a blanket statement. This kid's driving me crazy. He's so disruptive. He can't sit still. He's talking through my whole lesson. So what are the things that we need to do? Well, we need to give him a quiet space in the classroom. And we need to make sure we sit him away from his friends. We need to, hey, maybe this counselor or this person could take him during this time so I can finally get through my lesson. Well, the question I might ask the student, if I'm one of those people who's supposed to take the kid for a period of time so the person can do their lesson, is to play me the movie in his head of what happens when this class starts and what his interests are and what he wants to do and what his barriers are. And so an example, I don't know, out of 40 or so last year, or maybe more, interacting with kids this way, the student is hungry during that time because it's just before snack time, or the student is generally thrives in movement, or the student thrives in learning in ways that they can be a hands-on participant in the process, and they don't feel like they get it and they don't feel like they can articulate it to their teacher. So the problems are, well, it sounds like you have needs and it sounds like you don't have an ability to articulate it, or you don't feel comfortable. Maybe there's a power imbalance or something. So let's figure out how we have this kind of discussion. And the learning happens where the kid finally gets to say to a teacher and find the right time to say, hey, these things are going on. And when a kid can do that, but especially if a teacher can do that and be the first one to interact, then there's a conversation and then there's problem solving, and the kid's bought in because he feels heard. So it's not this kid's so disruptive. It's this kid has a demand placed on them that strip his skills of being able to handle the demand.
So I hear a couple of concepts there. There's this saying, put yourself in the other person's shoes. You say you want them to play the film of what's going on. It's almost as though you're trying to enter their mind and their body and tell them to project for you so you can see what they're seeing.
People might not be visual people, but if you ask them to show you what a problem is in whatever form, that enhances some sort of metaphorical molecule in the mind that allows somebody to open up and talk. So that's an interesting tip.
So but do you actually say, tell me the movie that's playing in your mind? Is that something you say?
This was a case in which I said that. Yeah. I mean, if I'll try to ask somebody to show me whatever show means to them, whether that means they're writing it down for me or articulating it to me or doing a dramatic acting out of it. Putting them, it's like the Gestalt method almost. It's like putting them in the sequence so they can think about what the beginning to end looks like and where the roadblocks are. But you're right. It's kind of like putting myself in their mind or asking them to invite me into their mind so I can better understand.
So obviously the term non-judgmental enters here. You're obviously saying to them, I just want to know what you're seeing. That's all I want. I guess the next concept that comes into play is empowerment, because you're saying, okay, I am learning what you're seeing and what your needs are. Your teacher doesn't know them. And somehow you have to communicate to your teacher what you've told me and what you're feeling. Is there a special way that you go about doing that?
Yeah, there's that. I mean, there's sometimes calling out the elephant in the room. Like, your teacher thinks you're just disrupting. And then saying what I actually believe. My guess is you wouldn't be anything like disruptive, or you wouldn't want somebody to think that about you if you were able to do it differently. So what's up and what seems to be getting in your way and what seems to be what you need.
So there's this thing about people acting out, and your assumption is what people often say. They're acting out because they're frustrated, and you cut right to the chase and say, okay, you're acting this way because you can't directly say what it is that you want.
Yeah. Objectively, it's like I've entered two people's movies, and one person's, the teachers or the adult, they have an expectation, and the student's not following the expectation. So there's that. And I know that. And I'm not withholding that information from the student. I'm not sneakily trying to pretend I'm their buddy and not like there's not a problem going on. So I address the fact that there's an expectation that they're not meeting. But then I give it back to them and say, you would meet expectations if you could, for sure. So what will it take for you to meet this expectation? And is there an expectation of yours that somebody's not meeting? Why don't you go first?
So you're empowering them and you're giving them a belief in themselves. You're saying, I know you don't want to be negative. And I know that if you have this skill, you won't be negative. You'll act in a positive way. You'll feel better and other people will feel better.
Totally.
Let's shift to, what's your reaction to the concept in addiction of denial? That somebody, of course, in the life process program, somebody has come and they're there because they have a problem. So it's not like you're picking people up off the street and say, oh, you're an alcoholic. Start with that the person's voluntarily entered into a conversation with you. And how do you get around arousing their defenses?
Oh, my favorite. This really happens all the time. And you and I have talked about it before. One of my favorites is somebody, a parent, a spouse, says you should join this program. So they join the program. And when we ask them questions about, what's ailing you, what's going on, what's something you want to change, they'll say, nah, nothing. But my wife thinks I have this drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem. And so I say, all right, so you don't have a drinking problem. Why does she think you have a drinking problem? And, they'll explain why they think their wife might think, I drink 4 beers a day. And every time I go crack the 4th beer, she starts getting all defensive and we get in a fight. And so then I can say, well, it sounds like your issue is you're having disagreements with your wife about what is or what isn't appropriate. And so is that something you want to tackle? And that's usually something they want to tackle. So I don't have to tell them, you are addicted. Come on, you're just denying it. Your wife thinks. We can say, you just told me there's a problem with you and your wife. So maybe that's what the best use of our time is.
And so it's clearly a matter of saying, well, you're here and you have to pay some money and take some time. There's something on your mind. what's on your mind?
Right.
Let's just talk about that.
By the way,
So
along the way, there's in any organization I've ever worked in or working with people, with the exception of the life process program, my acknowledging that the person's problem is the problem. People always have this bias, this cognitive distortion that's a slippery slope. Well, if you let them say, well, your problems are the only problems that matter, then what are you? You're just kind of denying them the opportunity to see the light, to have the epiphany that they're wrong. And I think of it completely differently, that usually the guy and his wife, we talk about discussions with his wife, and I don't say, it's not like we're ganging up on the wife and saying, well, what an idiot. We're saying that sounds like an adult disagreement where we have to somehow see eye to eye. And that's developing the skill of being able to talk those things out. And oftentimes people say, you know what, I don't really need to be drinking this way. Or sometimes they'll say, I don't know, the drinking part isn't the part that I care about. I care about my wife, or, whatever. So it usually leads to something fruitful.
you've thrown it in their lap. It's their life. In general, they don't want to be arguing with their partner. You want to get around that, and they're looking for different curves and ways to navigate that space.
Anything other than that is like behavior control. And so who gets to make the rules about how to control the behavior or turn the knob so someone obeys, and I don't like that concept.
You're a very non-judgmental person, I think, by nature.